is an award-winning, internationally recognized motivational speaker and poet. His words have been featured in USA Today, the LA Times, NPR, Yahoo News, Success Magazine, and archived in the Library of Congress. Russell sits on the National Board of Directors for the ARC, is a council member for the Autism Society of America, and has sat on the Nevada Governor's Council on Developmental Disabilities. Russell showed signs of autism as a newborn. However, he was not formally diagnosed until the age of 12 after suffering through 5 weeks in a lockdown psychiatric facility. In 2011, Russell wrote a book titled Inside Out: Stories and Poems from an Autistic Mind, which was featured in the LA Times, earned an honorable mention at the 2012 New York Book Festival, and won the award for literary excellence at the 2013 International Autistic People's Awards in Vancouver, Canada.
So you have stated that what you do not see is much more important than what you do see. Can you describe what you mean by that quote and then your invisible disability, or difference, I should say?
Yeah, I think when I say what you do not see is much more important than what you do see, I think it's like that for the majority of things in life. I mean, the saying "don't judge a book by its cover" is basically saying the same thing, right? It's all about what's going. My perspective, my take on the quote is, with regard to me, you don't see what's going on in my brain because I have several mental illnesses. You don't see the thought processes, you don't see the negativity bias, you don't see all these conditionings of the human mind. And that always leads to actions, words being said, how people appear. So oftentimes society takes us at face value. What they see, they judge that. They don't take into account the context surrounding it. And a lot of the context, unfortunately, is invisible in my case. So whether that's autism or, my other mental illnesses, a lot of why I do what I do and how I act is based on these things that people cannot see. So once they learn about me and learn about these invisible disabilities, then they can actually see the real me. This isn't the real me. And it's like that with everybody, right? It's just to a heightened extent in my case.
It's very interesting that you say that this is not the real you. What do you mean by that? Because clearly, as I know, like autism and other invisible disabilities, mental health and so forth are invisible. So, but obviously some are more pronounced than others. So when you speak to somebody, you can kind of know off the bat that there's, they have some type of issue, quote unquote, unless they're having a bad day, which is really not the case if you have some type of difference or disability. But what do you mean by that this is not the real you that's talking to me right now?
I wouldn't say it's not the real me that's talking to you per se, but what you see is it's not the totality of my life. You weren't here yesterday when I was having a difficult day, when I, broke down a little bit and was crying, or you won't be here tomorrow to see me have a better day than today. We don't take into totality who people are. We base them on what we see right in front of us. And that is never the real person. Obviously, it takes a long time to get to know the real person. And especially if you throw in autism, mental illness, invisible disabilities, it's going to take an even longer time, and you have to be much more patient in learning to truly understand the individual.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would say also, like yourself, people are very high functioning, and, you sometimes wouldn't even notice that, you have X, Y, and Z, disability just because it's, you're very high functioning. This is from what I'm seeing, but it's, like I said, things can be seen very quickly. Things can also be seen not as quickly. And I think, with your diagnoses, like there is a range, and, clearly you and I are just talking, like, it's not as visible to me where it could be to somebody else, regardless.
Absolutely. when I have, and when I was little, I mean, it was very visible. I was that kid in the corner of the room, in the corner of the classroom with his hood on, sucking his thumb, not talking to anybody and not making any eye contact. And then kids would come up to me and say, why aren't you talking? And I wouldn't even answer that question. So it was very visible when I was younger. And still today, it's visible when, my symptoms flare up, right? The behaviors are visible, but the causes of those behaviors will never be visible. So yeah, it's all about my meaning behind that quote of what you do not see is more important than what you do see is, again, it's all about the why. It's rarely about the what when we behave or act. There's a reason for everything, and I would hope that one day we can focus more on the whys as opposed to the what.
Right. I'm all behind it. So what is your definition of autism?
Good question. And it probably changes on a daily basis because my days are very up and down. One day, my definition of autism could be that it is an amazing gift that I'm absolutely blessed to have. The way it helps my mind think in very nuanced and very deep philosophical ways, the way it helps me relate to others and be extremely vulnerable and help them through their struggles because I'm just very compassionate human, the way it's made me very innocent. I have never done anything I've regretted. I've never, done anything at all to ever hurt anybody intentionally. So that would be on a good day, right? And then on the bad day, there's, what is autism? Autism is dealing with being terrified of the outside world because I'm extremely afraid of what people think of my differences. Autism is thinking in a way that does not translate well to others. I miss a lot of cues, and a lot of times people don't understand what I'm trying to say. Autism on a bad day is dealing with meltdowns, having meltdowns in front of my loved ones and my friends and feeling really guilty that they have to see me that way as a 30-year-old man. And on a bad day, it's dealing with the mental health symptoms of autism that are very prevalent: OCD, depression, anxiety, panic attacks. It's some days just not getting out of bed. So autism overall, I think it's a struggle, and the struggle deserves validation, especially with the Autism Awareness Month. It focuses a lot on the positives of autism, but I really wish we could focus more on the struggle because very few people talk about the struggle. Overall, I would just say autism is a struggle in life, and it's a great cause of, personally for me, a great cause of my suffering. But they say that those who know how to suffer, suffer well. And the more you actually suffer, the more character you build as an individual. So suffering is not a bad thing, right? It can build character. And for me, that's the beautiful gift of autism, is that the gift lies in the suffering. So it's actually a beautiful journey of highs and lows, but you look over your shoulder and you always just kind of cherish every step of the way.
Absolutely. That's very well said.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So clearly right now, no one would notice, but people with autism, and so I actually, speech major, and then I was also a psych major. So very well aware of people on the autism. So you and I could have in-depth conversations, and I totally know the inner workings of the brain to nth degree. And the what, I guess if you want, it's the why, and I know about the why and the what, but whatever, that's a whole other thing. But people with autism have difficulties with communicating or communication. Have you experienced difficulties communicating with others? It could be it could have changed also from when you were a child up until now, and being. I definitely, as a child, I dropped out of public school in the 5th grade due to my struggles. I wasn't diagnosed with autism until a year after that, at age 12. But at age 11, I really, really started to struggle. And even though I could speak, I chose at that time to not speak because I've been hurt by the outside world a lot. So I basically became a social recluse and just decided to really only trust my parents and my sister. So they were really the only people I spoke to. If I had to go to like a doctor or anything, my mom would speak for me. I might nod or shake my head as a yes or no. So back then I would say I was nonverbal by choice.
because I was too afraid of the outside world to speak to them. So that obviously hindered my whole personal life. I never had any friends because of that. I never really left the house. So that was a big hindrance. And it's due to that, obviously, not wanting to communicate, but in the past having communicated and not being understood, right? Now today, I feel like I'm slowly learning the rules of communicating and all the social norms, right? I don't think I'll ever quite get the hang of it, but I like to think I'm a very good communicator too. And this is an interesting kind of a nuance of my autistic brain is I'm very, very good at communicating with people I don't know that well. But when it comes to people who are important to me, or say I'm dating somebody, it becomes very hard for me to communicate in that regard, because I become increasingly self-conscious, and I get tripped up and I don't know what to say. I'm always afraid that people are gonna think I'm weird, and that stems from my past childhood. So I unfortunately I get in my head too much, which is the main interference of my ability to communicate today in my personal life. But there are, other than that, there are misreading cues. I take people very literally. The other month, one of my friends said, she said, she was going to drop something off for me. And she said, I have it in my car if you want me to drop it off. And I wasn't having a good day. So I said, I'm not, you can leave it on the porch, but yeah, I'm not going to open the door. Right. And so she got really hurt by that. I didn't know that she wanted to see me. I thought she literally wanted to just drop something off on my porch. But apparently she was using that because she wanted to see me. Hey, can I come over? I have this gift for you. I also want to see you. So I didn't read into that. And apparently I asked around, and that was a mess up on my part. So there are things like that I still don't quite, haven't gotten the hang of just yet.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have a brain injury, which is, the complete opposite of you with having an autistic, or no, a brain that has autism, I guess you should.
I don't care what you say.
No, but I actually do, because I do think it's important. I mean, yeah, you and I fine, but in the context of talking about people with disabilities, like you're not your autism. Yes, you do have autism, but it's not who you are as a person.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, anyways, I just said it that way, but no. I mean, everyone does it. Whatever. But although I'm well aware of the proper way. Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I can sympathize with you. I guess that's the right word. I can sympathize with you because, yeah, even though I have a brain injury, yet you have a brain that's autistic. I am very self-conscious when it comes to dating. I just around the fact that, they're big words. So like, I've had a stroke. I technically, I have epilepsy. I mean, it's pretty much cured, quote unquote, with medication. But those are big words to somebody that are not, that's dating me. They could worry that, while I'm having, while we're, getting intimate, I could have a seizure, like those that don't know. And so I am very self-conscious about it. I have learned, though, that as I've gotten, I've just learned over time, though, that a lot of people, they don't really give a frack, quote unquote. But my whole point is that, like, yeah, I am very self-conscious. And actually, when it comes to being like very literal, like you, I can sympathize with you. I could understand that if a friend's going to drop off, some packages that she wants to come over and see you. Totally get that. I wouldn't read into that differently, but there's a lot of different things that, whether it be some type of like quote, anyways, my whole point is that I get it, and it's difficult because other people don't get it necessarily.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And those who don't get it don't know they don't get it. So it makes the understanding hard to do.
Exactly. And then you need to describe to, the person that, if they don't understand your disability and like so forth. And even like today, I was speaking with somebody who does not understand my disability like whatsoever. And we were just in a meeting, and like it was actually my neuropsychologist. But she was like, you know, the way that you're going to say something to me is not going to be interpreted the same way as it would be to you or me who doesn't have a disability. And anyways, I'm just adding, like I get it totally.
Yeah.
So your book, On the Outside Looking In, My Life on the Autism Spectrum and Inside Out, Stories and Poems from the Autistic Mind, shares your journey with autism, but the reader can also sense your passion to also be a voice for those that feel unheard. So can you share a little bit more about this book and what was inspiration to write it?
Yeah, so I actually, both books contain a lot of poems, and I discovered poetry in my early 20s when I was very much isolated from the outside world. Poetry became that friend that I always, wished I had, a friend who could listen to my struggles and not judge, and I could just write down my emotions on paper, and it feels great. Especially was cathartic to, build a piece of art out of my struggle. I love the fact that poetry provides me a vehicle to do so. So that's what made me interested in poetry. And so I started writing poems all about my emotions. And I compiled enough in my early 20s to put them into a little book. And then I wrote a short autobiography of my life up until that point. And my motivation behind that was just to kind of let the world know I still existed. I felt very much forgotten by the world, by the outside world. And I just, I guess I wanted validation for my struggle because I felt, again, cast to the side and like nobody really cared about me aside from my family. I wasn't expecting it to help so many people. Just to people who read my book, they were able to relate to my life, whether it's through their family member or themselves. The poems really hit home with a lot of people. So that was actually my unintentional step into kind of advocacy and kind of sharing my story. And so then with the second book, which came out about a year or two ago, it's a much thicker autobiography, a lot more poems, and then insights gained and lessons learned as well. And my intention with that book was to really just be extremely vulnerable. Like that book is just a total transparent look into my life. I want people to, I've been through a lot of, pain is inevitable in life, but there's a lot of unnecessary pain in this world. And I've unfortunately been, I've had a lot of unnecessary pain in my life. And so my whole point of this book and sharing my story is just for people to realize what I've been through. I don't want that to happen to other kids or anybody, right? And so if they can kind of use my hindsight to give them foresight into making this world a little bit more understanding, kinder, and compassionate, then the reason I wrote the book would be validated.
It's great. And I think the more and more people that read your book will feel that from you for sure.
Thank you.
So what is the most difficult part of you can consider it, I guess, the artistic process of being a poet? Like what comes easy to you and what's more difficult for you?
That's a great question. I think one of the difficulties is, it's like just with anything creative, you can't rush it. You can't force creativity, right? And there are a lot of times I really want to write a poem or anything like that, but the creative juices aren't flowing. And so I'll get kind of frustrated with that and I'll try to force it. And it won't be my best by any means. So I've, kind of learned to just let my creativity, my inner poet come out when it wants to. And when it does, I can tell, the poems are just so much more passionate and beautifully put together. Another difficulty is alongside not being able to write poetry whenever I want. Another difficulty is sometimes I have so much to say And obviously I don't want to write like whether it's a spoken word poem or a written poem, I can't write that long of a poem, right? It has to be kind of succinct and to the point. And so trying to narrow in on a topic in poetry and then add those kind of subliminal messages through the wordplay or the rhyme scheme, that can be very difficult at times too. And there have been times where I've basically stared at like my computer for like 3 hours thinking of the next way to put the next line. So that can be a challenge too, but it's a fun challenge. It's like a game of chess. It's really good brain exercise. And other than that, I don't think there is much difficulty. And that's why it's a passion of mine. I think when I speak, especially to youth, I tell them, follow your passions. Don't follow anything else. Don't chase success, follow your passions, and success will follow you. Because that's what's great about things you're passionate about. It's a lot of enjoyment you get out of it, whether it's, fighting for what's right in this world or something creative or even a hobby, something you're passionate about. There's a very little difficulty if you're truly 100% passionate behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I mean, something that you're passionate about and something that you do, I mean, yeah, of course, there's always hardships. And, even with DNA, or that's what I call it, it's a short name for different enable. Like even with DNA, I mean, of course, there's difficulties. Like I have to, we're doing fundraising and it's, doing research is difficult for me because of my mind, the way that, my mind works, my cognitive difficulties, or just being the founder and the president and my organization, like difficulties. I am a very organized person, but when there's so many different things, it adds a different layer. But yeah, you have to do something that you're really passionate about, and I would preach that like you do, like to everybody, because
absolutely, because there's always going to be stressors, like you said, right? And so you might as well do something that makes those stressors worth it.
Right. And honestly, like unless, and this sounds crazy, but unless you have to do something, whether it be for financial means or I don't even know, but I'm just saying, because like some people will get into jobs that they don't want to do because they have to for, to bring home, money for the family or this and that. Like, why not do something that, you really like?
Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of people, there's people who have to take jobs because they unfortunately need the money, and then there's people who take jobs just because of the money, right? A lot of doctors out there, a lot of lawyers are in it just because, they make a lot of money, not because they're truly passionate about it. And money doesn't last long in terms of fulfillment.
It doesn't buy happiness.
Yeah, it doesn't at all. No, it doesn't.
Yeah. And you're talking to somebody who comes from a wealthy family. So I totally get it. And I mean, yes, it's great that like I come from a wealthy family and I can go get X, Y, and Z and like this and that, but like my parents are divorced, I'm just saying like from the back end, like, I mean, great, you have all this like money, but like, it's just stuff, quote unquote.
Yeah.
It's not
what
life's about. And I know that very well, but I totally get it.
Yeah.
So what do you think is something that would surprise people to know about you?
I think, and I was unaware of this until recently, so this is kind of a new thing for me too. I think a lot of people would be surprised at how much I actually do struggle with life. Apparently, and one of my friends told me this the other day, from my online persona and stuff like that. She was surprised to actually, again, learn some of the things that people do not see, right? And learn how much I really struggle. Because every day is, I'm going to get emotional, but it's a fight. It's a fight. And luckily, I'm a very optimistic person. I'm a very tenacious person, and I'll never give up. It doesn't mean I don't ever feel like giving up. I want to give up every day. I just don't, right? And, whether it's a severe depressive episode or my OCD kicking my ass all day long, or a lot of mood swings, or something to do with my autism and meltdowns, it's an exhausting life. It's an exhausting life. And, when I speak, I really bear my soul in that regard because I want to educate. I want to spread this awareness. Online, not so much. Online, I try to look on I try to give info and educational tactics for people to implement in their own life, right? I don't want to go on social media. And sometimes I will be very, bare my soul on social media, but I can't do that all the time because I want to motivate too, right? I can't just show the down times. So I think a lot of my followers online would be surprised for me to say that it's, do I like this life? Honestly, I don't know. But is it worth it? Hell yes, it is worth it. It's a challenge, but it's what I've been dealt and I'm going to make the best out of it.
Yeah, you've been making the best out of it since you said, what, the age of 12?
Yeah, trying to.
So, no, it's really difficult. I mean, you are, like I said, high functioning. And I mean, again, this is just one in-person meeting, but what people see is not always the real you. I mean, people will see me and will be like, oh, again, like I would have never noticed, or, my staff like at different Enable, like sees me so high functioning, which is true and capable, that they don't understand why sometimes I don't like all the constructive criticism they give me, or like the behind the scenes work with my neuropsychologist to make sure that like I'm paying attention in certain meetings. And I've had struggles, and it's frustrating because they don't understand. And it's, you want everyone to understand you or me or whoever.
Exactly.
And I totally get it.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point, actually, about not only about the struggles that people don't see, but the hard work that the people don't see. Whether it's your work with your neuropsychologist or, my work just to try to function every day. There's a lot of work that goes into that, and people don't see the behind the scenes work. It's almost like, a performance, a play, right? People see the play, they don't see all the practices that went into that play, right?
Of course.
And that deserves validation too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just say with a grain of salt, people take it for granted. So in 2017, you had a stressful experience, unfortunately, at the Reno Tahoe International Airport. Can you share a little bit about what happened to you on that day?
Yeah, so that was very stressful. It was there's like kind of a preface to that incident, and I'll kind of give the preface quickly. Is the day before that experience, I was supposed to fly to like Michigan or something, and it was when I just started speaking. And long story short, I get stuck on my layover in Salt Lake City for like 11 hours, and I'm not able to make it to Michigan, and I miss my speaking engagement. And so I'm stuck in Salt Lake Airport trying to get back home to Reno for 11 hours. And this is like my first time like really traveling by myself. So I'm like having a full on meltdown for like literally the whole 11 hours. And not one person even asked if I was okay. And it was like I was in like obviously an airport, it's a very public place, and thousands of people walked by, and they either looked at me like I was this crazy man crying his eyes out, or they pretended like I wasn't there, like I was invisible. And I don't know which one hurt more, but no smile, not even a, hey, are you okay? Or not even a simple validation like a head nod or like an I see you. It was great.
How old were you?
What's that?
How old were you when this happened?
I was 26.
Okay, so you're an adult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, continue.
And so that was very disheartening for me because I was just getting used to the outside world, and that was one of my first experiences as an adult with the outside world, and it was very disheartening to see the lack of compassion. So I come home, and the next day I have to fly out again, and that's the day I meet David at the Reno Tahoe International Airport. I was supposed to go to Chicago on this very next day. And again, my flight is like canceled last minute. And I was already exhausted from the prior day, right? I just got back to Reno. Now I'm trying to get out of Reno, and it's canceled. And so again, I just had a huge meltdown. I threw my bags down, and I really just left them in the middle of the airport and walked behind an empty ticket counter, and really just had whether you want to call it a nervous breakdown, a mental breakdown, I cracked. I started shaking. I was sweating profusely, really sobbing. It was one of the most intense physical episodes that I've ever endured, and that lasted for about an hour. But about 15 minutes into the episode, this airline employee from American Airlines named David walked up to me, and he just simply asked me, "Hey, are you okay?" And people understand that the simplest actions, for me anyway, mean the most. I mean, that was what I was looking for. That was what I was looking for the previous day at the Salt Lake Airport. So David asked me if I'm okay, and I say no. And it just kind of progressed from there. He started asking me what was going on. I told him I have autism, and just that human connection really saved me on a personal note. But David also saved my speaking engagement because he was kind enough to get me on a rescheduled flight so I could get to Chicago in time. And sure enough, I made my speech. So it was just kind of ironic that the day prior to that was such a disheartening experience. And then that day was such a hopeful, it restored my faith in humanity, that there are kind people out there. And he doesn't, I don't think even to this day, even though we still stay in touch, he truly doesn't understand what he did for me.
Wow. That's amazing. So you do keep in touch with him, but
Yeah.
that's really, really cool. Well, it's actually really nice in a lot of ways to see, and I think you mentioned this, like to see somebody, do something for you, not understanding what it really meant. And to kind of quote unquote overlook it, but I'm not saying in a bad way. It could be like this, in a good way, and if there were more people like that, actually, we'd have a better society. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's and the funny thing is David did everything right, and because like a bunch of news outlets picked it up, and they were interviewing David one time, and they were like, "Well, how much do you know about autism? How did you know what to do?" And he said, "I didn't know anything. I was just being a nice person." And that's what it's all about. It's not like we have to fully be an expert in every single difference in the world. You just simply need to be open-minded and kind. And it's so simple and at times very frustrating that such a simple thing is not implemented more in our daily lives.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that. So in your opinion, how does one let people around them know about their invisible disabilities? Like, what advice would you give to others?
Yeah, I would say, it's nobody's really privy to that information other than you and maybe your family. I mean, nobody deserves to. You don't have to disclose if you don't want to, right? There's no pressure. I mean, if you're gonna, for me, it's kind of different because anybody I meet already either knows I have it or they meet me when it's my career, right? My disability is part of my career, so people always know I have it. But in the past, prior to my speaking career, if I felt like people needed to know, I would tell them. But again, I think people feel too pressured in these days to disclose their disability. It's okay it doesn't mean you're ashamed of a disability just because you don't tell people about it, right? And I want a lot of kids to know that it's okay to not want it to be you, right? Like you said earlier, autism is not my life. It's just a component of my life. But for those who do want to disclose, I would, it's very difficult. Unfortunately, there's not like a general rule of thumb, but to tell people they have an invisible disability, I would just tell them my best piece of advice would be to really think if that person is ready to hear it, because there's nothing that hurts more than telling somebody that you have an invisible disability and the person you're telling it to either is not receptive to it or doesn't believe you, because that hurts. Putting your trust in somebody to be able to open up and tell them about your invisible disability and them kind of slapping you in the face because they don't believe you. I would just urge people to, if they do want to tell somebody about their invisible disability, to make sure that person's gonna be ready to hear it and that they're open-minded enough to hear it.
I agree with that. So you've been quoted saying, "I wouldn't wish my brain on anybody." Can you explain what you mean by that quote or that statement?
Yeah, Literally, I wouldn't wish my brain on anybody. If they wanted my brain, yeah, feel free. But I wouldn't. I struggle a lot, and people don't realize that I have 6 mental illnesses along with my autism. So it's not just like I have autism, right? It's a lot of neurological and mental disorders coming together to make this incredibly complex thinking apparatus that sometimes doesn't think. It just breaks down because of the overload. And that is just, again, like I said earlier, every day is a fight. And while I love who I am and I have come to cherish my brain, even though I didn't in the past, I absolutely love who I am. I don't think life should have to be this painful. So that's what I mean when I say that. I wouldn't wish the pain I've been through on anybody else. Because unfortunately, it is because of the way my brain is wired that the outside world treats me the way they used to and sometimes still does. And so that's what I mean. I wouldn't wish my brain on anybody in that regard. Obviously, again, I love my brain because it's even the ugly things are beautifully ugly. I cherish the totality of my brain. So I don't want that quote to come across as saying, hey, just stay away from this brain. There's a lot of good things, but I truly believe that in a world as modern as today, that we can realize that people can still be their best selves without having to discover that through being traumatized by the outside world. That's how I discovered it. I found my success through the struggle, but I don't want people to struggle as much as me.
I would agree. Yeah, I love myself to death and I would not change the world on it. But it's not something that, I would necessarily want X person to struggle with. Yeah, you could still live a very successful life that I have and like you have, or, you do, and me and all of that. But who wants quote unquote struggles in life to be limited to a certain degree? And you talk about someone who has autism, about yourself who has autism and then 6, mental health diagnoses. Of course, a lot of them, they're comorbid and they kind of all go together, but still, who wants to deal with that? Regardless that, life is beautiful and you wouldn't yourself on with a different brain. I do sometimes fantasize a little bit about what my life would be like if my brain basically it wasn't,
I do that all the time.
But I think about it. I don't think about my disability on a regular basis whatsoever. I do struggle, whether it be sometimes on a physical level or, obviously, cognitively, whatever the case is. But no, I don't think about it. But there are sometimes I'm like, I wonder, if I didn't have a disability, maybe I'd be in a relationship sooner. Maybe, I'll just be totally
a big part of that's human nature, right? I think everybody tends to say if A was removed from my life, then B would happen, or vice versa, right? So we always try to look at the grass is always greener, right? I often think about that too. I never went back to public school after I dropped out of 5th grade, and I've always been very athletic and loved basketball. And I think, gosh, if I hadn't went to high school and played on a basketball team, I think I probably could have been a professional basketball player. So there's things like that that I don't really think about it in the future tense, but I think of the past, like what could have been, right? That's interesting that you bring that up because that it's not like I consciously think about it.
Right.
Usually I'm damn struggling and I'm like, what if I didn't have these struggles, right? I wouldn't be where I am today without these struggles. So it's a double
gift, but at the same time you wonder.
Yeah, it's a catch-22.
Exactly. No, exactly. So if you could tell your younger self something, what would you tell him? Oh, you tell him.
Oh God, I would say, Russell, I love you, man. To this day, I'm still trying to learn how to be kind to myself. My mind can be my worst enemy in that regard. And I've always been so hard on myself. And even though I'm the most self-loving today that I've ever been, I realize that I'm still pretty damn hard on myself. And that goes for when I was younger too. And I struggled much more when I was younger. And so my heart breaks for that little boy who I used to be. And at times I'm still him. I really still feel that little boy's pain. So I would say, Russell, I love you. I would give him a big hug. And I would let him know that if you do follow your heart, Russell, everything will work out. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it. Just always believe in yourself and never give up.
I would agree. I mean, yeah, things when you're little are definitely different than, where you are now. But it would be nice, and this is obviously just kind of a question that I ask a lot of people because it's a fun question too. But yeah, you can't see when you're younger necessarily where you're going to be in life.
Yeah.
And of course, you're going to grow up. I mean, we've all grown up. You've grown up. I've grown up, and, do X, Y, and Z. But in the moment, it's not that, it's not that easy. And yeah, anyways, I can resonate with that very, very well.
Yeah.
I had something I was going to specifically tell you, but I lost my train of thought. That's all good. It's nothing to do with questions. I had something anyways, whatever. It is what it is. So my last question to you is, what would you tell another person who has an invisible disability or an invisible difference, whether it be a piece of advice, whether it be, some type of strategy, hope?
Yeah, it's a great question too. There's so many things I could say, but I think the one thing I would want to say the most, and hopefully that they would want to hear the most, is that I see them, that I will never understand what it's like to be them. I will never understand their struggles, but I can see that they struggle, and I want them to know that their hard work day in and day out just to get by is validated. And it can feel like it goes unnoticed, but it's not, because I know that work well myself. And so I would give them validation for the work, because as I'm sure it's difficult to keep going every single day when you're doing this hard work just to get by when nobody notices you're doing it. So that validation can really motivate people to keep going. And so that's probably the first thing I would say to people with invisible disabilities, whether it's mental illness, autism, or something else, is, just going to feel like you're alone. It's going to feel like nobody appreciates the work you just have to do to get out of the bed. But there are people who do. And you got to focus on the people who validate that, and people who kind of share the same life path as you, because that's what it's going to take to keep going in this long game of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know you mentioned your parents and your sister, but have you found also, like, as you've gotten older, other people to understand you to a certain degree, even if it's not the same level that your family does?
I think, I honestly I don't know how much my family understands about me, because I honestly don't talk. They see me struggle, but there's the.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, and because you bring up a good point. You're making me think that it's funny that my mom sees how much I struggle, but I never have the energy to tell her why, right? Because I'm so exhausted after the struggle. And again, it goes back to learning about the why. Yes, outside of my family, I've met two people in my 30 years of existence that have probably understood me as much as possible. And that's one was a woman, one's a guy. And that means more to me than anything else in this world, is finding people who get me, who almost know me better than myself sometimes, who can almost tell me, like, Russell, you're getting overwhelmed. And I'm like, you're right, thank you. It's just helpful to have a loving, supportive person who not only understands you, but accepts all of you as well.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I mean, it's interesting you say that. Like, I guess my parents see that I struggle, and they know, I guess, to a certain degree, whether it be my perceptual skills, my weaknesses, my abstract thinking, my attention, but they don't always understand everything, like my executive functioning difficulties, like with initiation or planning, like, so yeah, again, it goes back to like the why. But it's interesting, I never have thought about that perspective until you bring it up. It's a great perspective.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I don't think I've thought about it either. It just kind of popped in my head from when you asked me.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, this was so fun, Russell.